If you're a high performer looking to grow and make an impact, but feeling stuck, underappreciated, and burned out at work, you're in the right place. I'm Melissa Vining, and this is the Job Search for High Performing Misfits podcast. I help high performers leave draining jobs behind, reclaim their careers, and land roles in organizations where they can thrive. Tune in for tips, insights, and inspiration for your journey to fulfilling work that fits you. Hello and welcome back to Job Search for High Performing Misfits. I do not have a guest for my show today, but I did want to come on and just do a short episode on the importance of diversifying your job search strategy, because I think this is one of the things that is not talked about enough in the job search space and is a really important part of an effective job search. So let me tell you what I mean when I say diversified job search strategy, because I think initially people often think of this as, okay, I'm going to go out and apply to as many jobs as possible, and I'm going to be really broad and open in my approach. And if you have listened to any of my previous episodes or any of my other content, you know that this is not the best way to approach the job search. It actually makes your entire search more difficult and take longer and be less effective overall. So really instead, when we talk about diversifying, it means that we're using a variety of approaches to land your next job. So we're not relying only on a great resume or only on cold applications or, just one specific strategy. And the trap that I see people fall into so often is that they're focused just only on their resume. So they're looking at it and they're thinking, okay, if my resume was just a little bit better, or if I could tweak it a little bit more for this specific job, then all of a sudden this would work. And we know that a great resume alone is important, and it's an important part of the job search process, but it's not the only piece. I kind of relate this to investing, like financial investing. If you know anything about this, you know that the common advice is that we're going to diversify our investments, right? So we're not only putting all of our money into stocks or bonds or CDs, we're really spreading it out over these different areas, because when we do that, it mitigates risk and volatility. So when I think about this in terms of that financial investment, you're looking at the fact that there are so many factors when you go to invest your money that are outside of your control. So we don't know what's going to happen with the interest rates. We don't know what's going to happen with the stock value or the timing of certain, things in the market. And the same is true of the job search, because the job market has those types of factors that are always going to be outside of your control. So you don't know what's going to happen with a hiring process at a specific company. You don't know if that company is going to have layoffs, or if they're going to have job openings, or if the hiring manager is going to go on vacation in that moment. There are all of these different things that are outside of your control. Everyone's approaching the hiring process in a slightly different way. So there's going to be no one size fits all. And I think this is where people really get stuck, because you see so many people out there in the career space saying, I have this one strategy that is going to solve all of your problems. And there is no one strategy that's going to solve all of your problems. The approach needs to be diversified, because you never know which piece of this is really going to be the thing that gets you to the next position. And of course, we know that we only need one. We only need one situation where it's really the right job and the right fit, and they feel it from you and you feel it from them. So we want to put our energy into the places that are working, but we want to be open to these different types of strategies and using many of them at once in the job search. So I'm actually going to go over 5 different diversified approaches that I recommend. And what I want you to do is start to reflect on which of these are you already doing, and which of these maybe can you explore or can you start to try to incorporate into your job search. So the first one, it really is that great resume and great LinkedIn profile. And this is something where, I just mentioned, this is not the only thing that you need, and that is true. However, you do need to have a great resume and a great LinkedIn profile. So this is going to be the baseline that everyone really needs. And the thing about this is that, especially right now, when we have seen AI become so prevalent in people actually creating these materials, the materials themselves tend to be more polished, but it does not mean that they are more effective. So if you actually look at the human aspect of what it takes to make a great resume and a great LinkedIn, those pieces are pieces that people are missing right now and that can make you really stand out. So the things that are going to make these materials great are going to be having, first of all, a basic understanding of your target employer's goals and success measures. So you really need to hone in on who your target employers are. That's going to be, who the industry is, what kinds of companies you're targeting, what do those companies do, what is important to them, and how do they measure success. So when we look at those measures of success, oftentimes that means the company is looking to make money and save money. That's, the basic overall goal of corporate America. However, each company might get there in a slightly different way, and different things might be important to them. So for one company, maybe they're really looking to grow their customer base, or they're looking to retain customers or provide really excellent customer service so they have a good reputation. For other companies and other industries, they might be looking at making things more efficient within their operations. They might be looking to figure out, how can we save money by actually creating systems that cause our work to be more efficient and to take less human power and less time for everyone. There might be other companies or other spaces where they're looking to make some kind of a impact on the world. Like when we're looking at mission-driven spaces, oftentimes that's the approach they're taking. And of course, at the bottom of it, they're still looking at, are we making money? Are we saving money? Are we getting those grants? Are we running this efficiently? But how they're approaching that goal might be more of the impact. Are we making an impact on a certain number of people? And what does that look like? So you have to have that understanding of your audience before you can really create a great resume or a great LinkedIn. The next piece of that is going to be understanding your unique way of working and how you have made an impact. So for every single person, this is going to be different. I can say I'm a career coach, and many other people can say that, but they can't say that they work the same way as me, and they can't say that they have made the same types of impact that I have. So when we're looking at the kinds of things that we want to be including on the resume and the LinkedIn, we have to make sure that we're really speaking to those specific examples of impact. So overall, we're taking those two pieces and we're communicating the connection between the two. So what is the connection between what the employer needs and wants and what I can do and what I have done in the past? So the best way to be able to actually say this on a piece of paper or on your profile is going to be by providing context. So this is where we're looking at, what was the company that you worked for? How many people were you managing, for example? If you were managing a budget, how much was the budget? What kinds of things were you doing in that role? What were you in charge of? If you were training people, how many people were you training? If you were working with clients or customers, how many clients or customers were coming through on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or however you're measuring that? So you're actually giving context for each job. And usually I put this in what I call a context paragraph, or you could call it context statement, right under where you say the job title and the company name are. So you have that little statement about this is the company, this is the team that I was working for, this is kind of what this looked like. You're describing that context. And then under that, you're including the bullet points that show your impact. They show the results of the things that you did. And if you can tie those results to how the target companies measure success, that's going to be even better because it's showing directly if this company cares about making money and saving money, I have made money and saved money in these specific ways in the past. So when you combine those things, it really allows you to actually tell a story in your resume and in your LinkedIn. And that's where it comes across so much differently than people who are just saying, this is what I did, or they're trying to use buzzwords or all this jargon to make it look professional. And it actually causes everything that's important to get lost. So if you really do that and you really tell the story and you provide that context and those impact statements on your materials, you're automatically going to be in the top, I would say 10% of job seekers because most people are not doing this. So start there. The second diversified approach that I wanted to talk about is work samples. So you have a great resume, you have a great LinkedIn, but you still have to back this up with real examples of what you can do. So for each job and each person, this might look slightly different. So for someone, you might be able to do this really easily on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a great platform for this because it gives you the chance to include multimedia. You can include it in many different places throughout your profile. So you could start with the experience section itself. So if you have specific work samples that go with those jobs, you can actually upload that media to those experiences. You can also create a separate section called a featured section, and that's a great place to show off the best work that you have that you want someone to see immediately when they visit your profile because it comes up right under your about section. So it's one of the first things that people will see on your LinkedIn. So that's a great place to start with thinking about what is it that I have that can actually show this is what I can do. You can do something similar to that in a digital portfolio. So you could create a website. There are lots of different platforms that allow you to do this for free. Oftentimes, you're not going to be able to create a personalized URL if you're using the free version, but for the purpose of a digital work portfolio that you're going to include on your resume, on your LinkedIn, in your job applications, you really don't need a customized URL. So you can actually do this for free, create a digital portfolio, and upload any examples that you have. So when I'm thinking about what goes into a portfolio, it again really varies based on the job and what it is that you want to show. So for some people, it might be something like photos, it might be something like videos, it might be something like articles. We often think about a portfolio in terms of the fact that maybe it's only for creatives, or it's only for photographers or interior designers or things like that. And of course, it's important for those people. But when you're using it as one of these diversified job search strategies, it actually helps you stand out even in spaces where this is not typical. So if you're a project manager, for example, you can include details about the projects that you've worked on. Maybe you include kind of a summary of those projects. You include some of the data or the deliverables. You might have graphs or charts that you can create to show different pieces of it. And again, it's pointing back to the fact that you can do this job, and this is an example of the work that you've done. You can also do this in more of like a one-pager PDF. So if you think that what you want to show off is better suited to just a one-page document, this can be a really great way of showing your work because it's also something that's really portable. You can take with you to an interview. You can give it to a hiring manager. When I talk about salary negotiation and kind of the plan around that, oftentimes this can be a really valuable piece of it because it's, again, something to point back to. This is the value that I can provide in this specific job. So if you already can demonstrate that value, it will sometimes allow the employer to say, it looks like we can actually pay this person more because we see immediately that they're going to be providing us that value back. Another way of doing this could be a brief slide deck. This is also a great option because it's something that you can use in an interview. So if you have some examples of your work put together in a few slides, and we're not talking about like an hour-long presentation, but it could be something as simple as maybe just 3 slides that show some examples of the projects that you've worked on or the things that you've done in the past that you're really proud of and you want to be able to speak to in an interview. That gives you, again, that kind of tangible thing to come back to both anchor yourself and also to allow someone to really see visually what you have done. Okay, so that was diversified approach number 2. The third one that I want to talk about is the one that everyone loves to hate, which is networking. And this is so important, and I talk about it so often because you cannot get anywhere in this competitive job market if you neglect networking. So when we're thinking about networking, we want to start with conversations with people you already know. So in those spaces, it's a little bit easier to have the conversation because you can be upfront right away about the fact that you're looking for a new role. You can tell them about what's important to you and the kinds of things you're thinking about when you're doing your job search, and see if they know about any opportunities, or maybe they have connections, or they have some advice that they can offer to you. Another way of networking, there are many different kind of ways to approach this, and I encourage you to think about all of them and maybe use a combination. The second way that I wanted to mention was building relationships with people at your target employers. And this is something that means, for one, you have to really start by actually having target employers. So you have to have done the work in advance of identifying the types of companies you want to work for and building your list. And then you have to actually go and find people who work there, either in the departments that you want to work for or doing the role that you want to do, or maybe you even know someone or you have some sort of second degree connection there already. So you're starting there and you're starting to build relationships with these people. So this is not about going in and asking for a job, but it's about building the relationship first and then expanding on it. So sometimes what happens is that people know that they're supposed to do this, so they go find one person, they talk to that person, and it kind of ends there. And then they say, well, I tried networking, but it didn't work. And what I want to tell you is that you have to actually keep networking with everyone at that employer. So if you have a target employer, you are starting with one person, and it's great if it's someone you already know, or if you have a connection with someone else who can introduce you, start there, but then continue meeting more and more people at that company, or at least in that department or on that team, and continue networking until you know everyone there or until they hire you. So you can't just do one and then say, okay, I tried it, it didn't work. You have to really continue. And I do know people who have used this approach and they have had to network with almost every single person in the department, but then eventually they do get hired. So you're building those relationships and you're being intentional about coming back so that you are visible and people know you and they recognize you and they start to want to work with you because they have that familiarity. Another way of networking is by volunteering in your industry or with professional associations or at your target employers. So there's a couple different kind of approaches here. So inside of your industry, there might be professional associations. For example, when I was teaching music, I was on the Music Teachers National Association. I was on the board for Massachusetts. So that was a volunteer position, but it was a way for me to really organically meet and interact with other people in my industry, other music teachers, and I made a lot of friendships there and got a lot of opportunities out of it. So that's a great place to start. You could, volunteer on the board, like I mentioned. You could volunteer at an event. Sometimes those kinds of associations will have networking events or professional development events or conferences or things like that where they need people to help run them. So get plugged in there. Also, volunteering at your target employers. This can be easier if your target employer is like a nonprofit, because oftentimes they're already looking for volunteers. But even if that's not the case, if you are looking for, jobs at regular corporations or small businesses or whatever, you could still offer to volunteer. So just because they're not actively going out and looking for volunteers doesn't necessarily mean that they'll say no if you approach them and say, hey, I'm looking to help out with this thing. Do you need help with this? That could be an option to kind of get plugged in and start to show them the kind of work that you can do. You can also network by directly reaching out to the hiring manager after you apply for a job. So this is not as much of a proactive relationship building thing, although it can be, of course, combined with those other strategies. But this is really about pulling your application to the top of the pile, because right now in this competitive job market, so many people are applying for every single job that you can easily get lost, even with that great resume and great LinkedIn profile, even with examples of your work. You might be one of hundreds of applicants. So by actually intentionally looking through the job description, figuring out who the hiring manager is. So oftentimes their name is not going to be on there, but their title probably will be. This job reports to manager of XYZ. Go look that person up on LinkedIn, find who that is, and then actually send them a message. Let them know that you applied, give them a tiny bit of information about your background, even attach a work sample, right? So they can immediately see this is what this person has to offer. Okay, so that's strategy number 3. Strategy number 4 goes along with that. So it's kind of building off this, which is to make your expertise visible. You want to be known in your space. So for every person and every job in every industry, that might look like a different space. So you have to find out where your people are. A lot of times we talk about LinkedIn in the career space because it's a big networking platform, but it's not the platform that's used in every single industry or every single job. So if LinkedIn is not the place where your people are, you have to find out where they are. It might be something like GitHub. It might be a Slack or a Discord channel for that industry. It could be that they're having in-person industry events or conferences or talks or things like that. So wherever they are, you need to go there and show them what you can do. So this is where you really have to be putting yourself out there. You have to be getting in front of people. You have to be getting your work in front of people. So this might mean that you're volunteering to be a guest on a panel, for example, so you can really speak about your expertise and start to show that and start to get known in that way. It might be that you're writing blog post for a specific blog in your industry. There might be like a newsletter that goes out for, let's say, an industry association, and you could write a article for that. You might lead a committee. You could actually do this on your own. So if you are the kind of person that loves to put time and energy into creating things, you could create your own blog or your own newsletter, or actually put together your own events in your space to start to become known in that way. So whatever strategy you choose to use, again, just like how I talked about with the networking, you can't just do it once and assume that that's it. You have to be consistent, because this is something that builds over time. You can't go talk at one event and then say, all right, everyone sees my expertise and I'm all set. You have to really do it again and again to maintain that visibility and for people to start to recognize who you are, your name, the type of work that you do, and what your expertise is. So that's number 4. Number 5, the final strategy that I wanted to talk about here, is just thinking creatively about your job search, because there is not just one way to get a job. There is not just one way to meet your goal. So an example of this kind of creative approach to it could be a bridge job. So this might be the first step to a longer term goal, but you need to make sure, if you are pursuing a bridge job, that it has some kind of alignment with your overall goals. So for example, I was working with one client who was trying to, as a long-term goal, make an industry change. But her shorter-term goal and her more pressing goal was to eliminate her commute or drastically reduce it, because she was commuting 2 or 3 hours every day, driving to another state to go to work. And so she was really looking for either a hybrid position or a remote position, or a position that would be in her city so that she could eliminate or reduce that commute and spend more time with her family. And so for her, she ended up making an industry change. It wasn't to the long-term goal industry, but it was now with a company that is just like 2 miles from her house, where she can actually bike to work. So it completely changed her work-life balance and overall impacted her life really positively. And now she can use it as a stepping stone to the long-term goal, which is going to be that other goal industry. Another way of approaching this can be through temporary or contract work. So this could be things like employment or staffing agencies, or working with recruiters. This is also something, like with any of the strategies that I'm talking about, you can use this in conjunction with other strategies. So even though you might be going out and finding job opportunities at your target employers and applying directly there and reaching out to the hiring manager, doing all these other things, at the same time, you could be working with an employment or staffing agency or a recruiter who might know about other types of opportunities, or, other companies that are hiring that maybe you didn't know about that could be a good fit. So this can be a great add to your strategy, and probably not the only thing that you're going to be doing, but something to increase, the potential opportunities that you have. So especially when I'm working with people who are currently unemployed, this can be a really, really good option, because it gives you something that you can use to get your foot in the door, or even just to meet your basic needs while you continue to look for the next thing that's going to be more of a long-term type position. If you are currently working, and let's say you have a job that you don't mind, and it's not the 2 or 3 hour commute, and you can do it for a bit longer while you continue working, then of course you want to stay in that job rather than taking a temporary or contract position, because there is a bit of a risk with temporary or contract work that you can get kind of stuck in a cycle of doing that type of work, and it tends to be a bit harder to get out of it. But of course, if you are unemployed and that is the best option for you right now, that can be really helpful. Another way of approaching this could be through self-employment or a side gig or some kind of consulting. So again, this is not for everyone. And for some people, this is really not the right solution. But for others, it can help get you some kind of experience or some kind of just interest in what you're doing, and can help you build more connections and increase your network and increase your visibility and all of those other strategies that I talked about at the same time. Another way of approaching that would be what we call a portfolio career. So you're not necessarily doing just one thing, but you're actually putting together many different pieces or different contracts or different part-time things, or you're doing self-employment plus something else. And that way it gives you a whole and gives you some more flexibility and maybe allows you to get more of what you want and do more of what you want. So those are my 5 tips for diversifying your job search strategy. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time. If you love this podcast, be sure to hit subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with a friend so we can help more high-performing misfits find work they love. See you next time.